before you know it's normal to see Jeff Bezos and billionaires on podcasts. It's like, let's take a moment here to acknowledge the shift that is happening in the media and marketing world, that all the billionaires prefer doing podcasts now instead of just tweeting or doing the Tonight Show or any other various forms of social media that they could be doing. So the Lex Fridman podcast is a show that I really enjoy. He is a professor. He is a very great interviewer. He's just a very good podcaster. I think the vibe that he has on his show, a lot of my clients, when they are referencing shows that they want to emulate, often refer to Lex's podcast. And I totally understand why. And so one of the things that I want to break down is using the opportunity of Jeff Bezos coming on his show, which is a big deal, right? But it's not really a big deal if you've been following Lex, because he lands guests of that stature all the time. Every time I see guests this big, it makes me wonder what would actually motivate them to use podcasting as a medium that they want to express themselves with. Somebody like Jeff Bezos he could go on The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon. He could probably host SNL or do anything that he really wanted to on mainstream television. But why is he choosing to go on Lex Fridman's podcast? One of the most immediate benefits, aside from the obvious ones like publicity or promoting their book or something relevant that's going on that they might want to be marketing, they might be on some kind of press tour, and now, podcasts are involved in that, and their publicist told them, hey, you have to go do this. But many times this is not the case, right? These people put themselves voluntarily into this situation with somebody like Lex, who they respect, who they know, whose show they even probably listen to and enjoy. So number one is that they have full trust and faith in the host, right? The interviewer, the show, the reputation, the brand, the image that's kind of been created, where it's like, oh, this person isn't going to invite me on and just screw me over, right? A lot of times on news shows or The Tonight Show or whatever big show is on mainstream, you have that kind of vibe where it's like, hey, come on, we're going to try to make you look as good as we can in 2.5 minutes, but you might look really dumb, right? Especially in recent years, most people have wanted to stay away from that. They don't really want that kind of attention, right? Jeff Bezos can go do it, but he doesn't necessarily utilize that as his first mode of going and creating a piece of content, right? Number two, podcasting is something that over the years, if you look at the top people you respect in any medium, any craft, you will notice when they are on a podcast, they refer to this Elvis dust or magic that, there's something I really enjoy, something that's fulfilling about sitting here and talking with you. We could have done this for, plenty more hours. I think that Jeff Bezos said that he could have talked to Lex for even more hours, right? So what is it about the fact that these people, like in any other scenario, you'd have to pay Jeff to sit down and talk to you like that. But the fact that he's willing to use this space as an opportunity to show himself, right? He's telling a bunch of stories about him growing up on a farm, doing all this stuff where you're like, oh, this is not what you get maybe in the headlines, right? So there's an immediate character arc that podcasting inherently has been famous for, I would say, over the last 10 years, right? You don't even have to try. The host doesn't have to try. Just by the guests kind of revealing themselves and not being under the pressure of like a 2.5, 5 minute clock where they have to be super funny, it allows them to actually relax. And you're like, whoa, this is a normal person. Like you see sides of this person. For example, Mark Zuckerberg, right? Very controversial, but he chooses to go on Lex's podcast as well, right? And when he's telling a story about how he has kids, right? You almost forget that. You're like, oh, right, has a family. Like we just see him as whatever, this controversial figure, but there's a lot more going on. Oh, the two things that he says to his kids every day that he reminds himself of, he tells this story, which is something like, what am I excited about today? Or what am I grateful for today? And how can I help somebody else today? As simple as it was, for 1 second, it made you put your guard down around any controversy that might be going on, any preconceived notions that you have based on what you've read about this billionaire, biographies you might have read, right? Scandals you might have heard of. And you literally just hear kind of a dad talking about relating to his kids and also learning from his kids in that moment. And it's a very unusual thing to expect out of somebody like Mark Zuckerberg, right? You have the meme in your mind of like him with the sunblock on his nose and, the leotard on or whatever. And it's like, same idea with Jeff Bezos, right? Where it's like, oh wow, man, this guy is really living it up. I can't wait to see what he talks about. There's so much more room for context. It's harder to just pull out a snippet and make you look bad. And these podcast tours are something that's becoming more and more common, where people are voluntarily using that as a way to skip radio, skip any other talk shows they might do, and just go in front of somebody that's going to be kind of relaxed and they can have a normal conversation. And everybody on the other end is mind blown either way, right? They actually walk away looking better in that interview than in many other cases. The third and most obvious thing that I want to highlight is, of course, Jeff Bezos is looking, and his team, right, are looking at Lex Fridman's audience also. And they're like, wow, like there's so many people who listen to this and so many other names that have been on here that I want to be kind of associated with, to where if there were respect points, it skyrockets the second that you see, oh, Elon Musk and, these other people who now you feel like you're missing out, like you want to be invited. This is kind of something that happened when I first did my podcast that landed me the dream internship and my dream job. I really just got people who were kind of knew each other, like coaches in the industry that respected each other, athletes in the industry. And when you would say, hey, I did an interview with this person and this person also, like it was a no-brainer, they would be like, oh yeah, of course, like I want to be on there. And people you never expect, right, who I would be afraid to ask on, would reach out and be like, hey, when are you going to have me on the podcast? And here on the other end, you're thinking like, wow, like I thought you were too busy for this. But a lot of people, for some reason, even if there's 5 people listening on the other end, have this desire to be heard in that format, right? People love bragging about, oh, I was on this show, I was invited, and, somebody made me look good. Somebody actually listened to me. And so that's obviously the other benefit that Jeff Bezos and other people get by going on these shows, is there's so much respect built in. There's so many clips and media production that's going to happen around this anyways, that it's like, it's free. He didn't have to really, aside from his time, he didn't have to start his own, right, and take on this massive undertaking. He literally is just bouncing around, going to places where there's underpriced attention. But mainstream, it seems kind of silly, right? You see on CNN, Lex Fridman's podcast being a snippet from there being pulled and shared because of this other person being on. It's like, that only used to happen on TV, like if you had a big network show, and now you can make that happen in your room if you had a guest who was compelling enough. So obviously, I don't know Jeff Bezos or Lex Fridman, and I can't tell you exactly why they had this episode. It's amazing the people that will become available to you when they know that you're going to make them look good. If they trust and they have seen, okay, this person's going to do a great job interviewing, it's not just going to be a boring thing, it's like, it's going to bring the best out of me, we're going to get some clips, we're going to get some marketing material out of this, then you are much more likely to land a big guest like that. So I hope this was useful in analyzing the guest dynamics that happen with big guests like this and how it applies to our world, like the Jeff Bezos of our niches that we want to go after, right? That seem unreachable. Before you know, it's normal to see Jeff Bezos and billionaires on podcasts. It's like, let's take a moment here to acknowledge the shift that is happening in the media and marketing world, that all the billionaires prefer doing podcasts now instead of just tweeting or doing The Tonight Show or any other various forms of social media that they could be doing. So I'm not saying that that is what we should all be doing too, but it's just something, as a fan of long form podcasting and long form content, I always love shining a light on situations like this when it's executed very beautifully. So check out that full episode on Lex's podcast as well. I checked out a lot of the clips. That's really what I enjoy on his channel. And check out the resources in the description below. There's a lot of tools that I think you might find useful if you yourself are on a podcasting journey.